The little girl's hand trembled in her father's grip. 4 children huddled in the frozen mud behind the general store, and the smallest one wasn't moving anymore.
"Papa,"
Nell's voice cracked.
"Papa, they're throwing those babies away. Like garbage. Can we buy them? Can we buy all 4 before they die?"
Caleb Thornton hadn't cried in 3 years. Not since they'd lowered his wife into the cold Wyoming earth. But standing in that alley, watching his 7-year-old daughter try to save children the whole town had abandoned, something inside him shattered completely. If you've ever seen innocence fight cruelty, stay with me. Watch this story unfold to the very end. Hit that subscribe button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story can travel. The general store smelled like tobacco and desperation. Caleb Thornton kept one hand on his daughter's shoulder while the clerk wrapped their supplies in brown paper. Simple things: flour, salt, coffee. The quiet necessities of a life built far from other people. "That'll be $4 even, Mr. Thornton." Caleb nodded and reached for his coin purse. Beside him, Nell pressed her face against the window, her breath fogging the glass.
"Papa?"
"Just a minute, sweetheart."
"Papa, there's children out there."
The clerk snorted. "Them Cole kids again. Been hanging around town for weeks now. Sheriff keeps running 'em off, but they come back like rats." Caleb's hand stilled on the counter. "Cole kids?" "Orphans. Parents died in some fire up north. 4 of them, if you can believe it. Oldest one's maybe 10, 11. Youngest can't be more than 3 or 4. The clerk shook his head. "Shame, really. But what can you do? Town's got enough troubles without taking on somebody else's problems." Nell tugged at Caleb's coat.
"Papa, please, come look."
"Nell, we need to—"
"The little one ain't moving, Papa. Please."
Something in her voice made Caleb turn. His daughter's gray eyes, so like her mother's, were bright with tears she was fighting hard not to shed. She was 7 years old, and she'd already learned that crying didn't fix anything. Margaret had taught her that in the months before the fever took her.
"Be strong, little one. Your papa needs you to be strong."
But right now, Nell didn't look strong. She looked terrified. Caleb took his change from the clerk and followed his daughter outside. The cold hit him like a fist, February wind cutting through his coat and finding every gap. Nell was already moving, her small boots crunching through the frozen mud as she rounded the corner of the store. He found her standing at the mouth of an alley, perfectly still. "Nell, what—" Then he saw them. 4 children huddled against the back wall of the building, pressed together for warmth like a litter of abandoned puppies. The oldest, a boy with dark hair and hollow eyes, had positioned himself in front of the others. His hands were curled into fists, and even from 10 feet away, Caleb could see him shaking. Behind the boy sat a girl, maybe 8 or 9, with a smaller child tucked under each arm. One of them, a boy with light brown hair, had his face buried in her shoulder. He wasn't making any sound at all. The 4th child, the smallest, lay across the girl's lap. A little boy with golden curls, no more than 4 years old. His eyes were closed, and his lips had a bluish tint that made Caleb's stomach drop. "Get away from us!" The oldest boy's voice cracked, but he didn't move. "We ain't done nothing wrong. We'll leave. Just don't hurt them." Nell stepped forward before Caleb could stop her. "We ain't gonna hurt nobody. My papa helps things. He fixed a bird's wing once, and a baby deer that got caught in wire. He can help your brother." The boy's eyes flicked to Caleb, then back to Nell. "Ain't nobody helps us, miss. That's just how it is." "That ain't true." Nell's voice was fierce. "Papa, tell him that ain't true." Caleb moved slowly, the way he'd learned to move around skittish horses and wounded animals. He crouched down, putting himself at eye level with the oldest boy. Up close, he could see the child's face clearly, sharp cheekbones that spoke of months without enough food, a bruise yellowing on his jaw, eyes that had seen too much and expected nothing good. "What's your name, son?" The boy's jaw tightened. "Why you want to know?" "Because I'm asking, and because that little one in your sister's lap needs help, and I can't help if I don't know who I'm helping." Something flickered in the boy's expression. Surprise, maybe, or the faint ghost of hope, quickly suppressed. "Ezra," he said finally. "I'm Ezra Cole. That's my sister Sadie, and my brothers Tommy and Benny." His voice hardened. "And we don't need nothing from nobody. We take care of ourselves." "How long you been taking care of yourselves, Ezra?" "Long enough." "How long since any of you ate?" Silence. The girl, Sadie, looked up at Caleb with dark eyes that held too much knowledge for a child her age. 3 days, she said softly. "We had some bread 3 days ago. A lady threw it out behind the bakery. It was mostly good." "Sadie, hush." Ezra's voice was sharp. "Don't tell him nothing. He's just gonna..." "Gonna what?" Caleb kept his voice low, steady. "Gonna help you? Gonna make sure that baby doesn't freeze to death in an alley? That what you're afraid of?" Ezra's fists clenched tighter. "People don't help us for free, mister. We learned that already. Whatever you want, we ain't got it. So just leave us alone." Nell pushed past Caleb and dropped to her knees in front of Sadie. She reached out and touched the smallest boy's forehead, then yanked her hand back like she'd been burned. "Papa, he's so cold. He's so cold he feels like snow." Caleb moved without thinking. He shed his coat and wrapped it around the little boy Benny, lifting him from Sadie's lap. The child weighed almost nothing. His small body was limp, but when Caleb pressed his ear to the boy's chest, he heard a heartbeat. Faint, but there. "We need to get him warm, now!" Ezra scrambled to his feet. "What are you doing? Put him down. You can't just..." "I can and I am." Caleb was already moving toward the mouth of the alley. "You can come with me, or you can stay here and freeze, but this child is coming with me either way." "You can't take him!" Ezra's voice broke on the words. "He's my brother. You can't just take him." Caleb stopped. He turned and looked at the boy. Really looked at him. 11 years old, maybe. Thin as a rail, wearing clothes that were more whole than fabric. But standing there with his fists raised, ready to fight a grown man twice his size to protect his family. "I ain't taking him," Caleb said quietly. "I'm saving him. There's a difference. Now you got a choice. You can trust me, or you can watch your brother die. Which is it gonna be?" Ezra's face crumpled. For just a moment, the hard shell cracked, and Caleb saw what was underneath. A child. Just a child who'd been carrying a weight no child should ever have to carry. "Ezra," Sadie's voice was gentle. "Ezra, we gotta go with him. Benny's gonna die if we don't. And Tommy..." Her voice caught. "Tommy ain't talked since the fire. He needs help too. We all do." Nell stepped forward and took Sadie's hand. "My papa's good. He won't hurt you. I promise on my mama's grave." The words hung in the cold air. Ezra looked at his sister, then at his brothers, then at Caleb. Something passed across his face, too fast to read. "Fine," he said. "But if you try anything, mister, anything at all, I'll kill you. I don't care how big you are." Fair enough. Caleb shifted Benny's weight in his arms. "Nell, help them to the wagon. We're going home." The ride back to the ranch took 2 hours. Caleb pushed the horses harder than he should have, but the little boy in his arms was barely breathing. Nell sat in the back of the wagon with the other 3 children, sharing her blanket, keeping up a steady stream of chatter that somehow seemed to calm them. Ezra sat rigid, his eyes never leaving Caleb's back. The boy didn't trust him. Caleb understood that. Trust was earned, not given, and these children had learned the hard way that adults couldn't be relied upon. Sadie held Tommy close, her arms wrapped around him like she was trying to hold him together. The middle boy hadn't said a word since the alley, hadn't made a sound at all. He just stared ahead with empty eyes, and occasionally his hand would move, tracing patterns on his leg that Caleb couldn't decipher. When the ranch finally came into view, Caleb heard Sadie's sharp intake of breath. It wasn't much, he knew. A cabin, a barn, some fenced pasture. But to children who'd been sleeping in alleys and under bridges, it probably looked like a palace.
"This is your home?"
Sadie's voice was barely a whisper. "This is our home," Nell corrected.
"And now it's yours too, right, Papa?"
Caleb didn't answer. He couldn't make promises he wasn't sure he could keep. One night, he told himself. Just get them through one night. Feed them, warm them, make sure the little one doesn't die, then figure out the rest in the morning. He carried Benny inside and laid him on the bed, the one he'd shared with Margaret before the fever took her. The cabin was cold. The fire burned down to embers, but Caleb built it back up quickly, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Nell, get blankets, all of them. Sadie, there's water in the kettle. Put it on the fire. We need to warm him from the inside." The children moved. Even Ezra, after a moment's hesitation, started help. He found wood for the fire without being asked, stacking it beside the hearth like he'd done it 1,000 times. "We lived on a farm," he said quietly, not looking at Caleb. "Before. I know how to work." "I can see that." Benny's eyes fluttered open. He looked up at Caleb with confusion, then fear, then something that might have been wonder.
"Who are you?"
His voice was thin as paper. "My name's Caleb. You're safe now. You're going to be okay."
"Where's Ezra? Where's Sadie?"
"Right here, Benny." Sadie appeared at the bedside, her face wet with tears she'd finally stopped fighting. "We're all right here. We ain't going nowhere." The little boy's hand found hers and held on tight.
"I was dreaming," he said. "I was dreaming about Mama. She said everything was going to be all right."
Caleb felt something twist in his chest. He stepped back, letting Sadie take his place, and found himself face to face with Ezra. "He's gonna live," Caleb said. "He just needs warmth and food and rest." Ezra nodded, but his expression didn't soften. "What do you want from us?" "Nothing. Nobody does nothing for free, mister. I told you that already. And I told you there's a difference between taking and saving." Caleb crouched down again, meeting the boy's eyes. "I lost my wife 3 years ago. Fever took her in the dead of winter, same as this. I couldn't save her. I tried everything, and I couldn't save her. You understand what that feels like? To watch someone you love slip away and not be able to do a damn thing about it?" Ezra's jaw worked. "Yeah," he said finally. "I understand that." "Then you understand why I couldn't walk past that alley. Why I couldn't leave your brother to die when I had the power to help him." "But you don't even know us." "I know enough. I know you've been protecting your family with everything you got. I know you ain't eaten in 3 days and you're still standing. I know you were ready to fight me, a man with a gun, with nothing but your bare hands, because you thought I was going to hurt them." Caleb put his hand on Ezra's shoulder. "That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." For a long moment, Ezra just stared at him. Then, so slowly Caleb almost missed it, some of the tension drained from the boy's shoulders. "One night," Ezra said. "We'll stay one night. But in the morning, we're gone. We don't need charity." Fair enough. One night. But even as he said it, Caleb knew it was a lie. One night wouldn't be enough. Not for these children, and not for him. Something had cracked open inside him when he'd seen them in that alley. Something he'd kept carefully sealed since Margaret's death. And now that it was open, he wasn't sure he could close it again. Nell appeared at his elbow.
Papa, I made soup. Well, I tried to make soup. It might be more like water with things in it. But it's hot.
Caleb smiled despite himself.
That sounds perfect, sweetheart.
They ate together, all 6 of them crowded around the small table. The Cole children devoured their food like they'd never seen a meal before. And maybe they hadn't. Not a real one, anyway. Caleb watched them eat and felt something shift in his chest. Benny, wrapped in blankets by the fire, managed a few spoonfuls before falling asleep again. His color was better now, the blue fading from his lips. He'd live. Children were resilient that way. They could survive things that would kill a grown man. Tommy still hadn't spoken. He ate mechanically, his eyes fixed on something nobody else could see. Occasionally his hand would move, tracing those same patterns on the table, and Sadie would touch his arm gently, bringing him back.
He ain't talked since the fire,
Sadie said quietly, catching Caleb's eye.
Not one word. He used to talk all the time. Used to sing even. But since that night, it's like his voice just went away.
What happened? Nell asked.
What fire? Sadie and Ezra exchanged a look. Something passed between them, a silent communication born of shared trauma. Our farm, Ezra said finally. Somebody burned it, while we were sleeping. Papa got us out, but he went back for Mama and... He stopped, his hands, resting on the table, curled into fists. They didn't come back out.
Who burned it? Caleb asked.
Don't know. Maybe an accident, maybe... Ezra's voice hardened. There was men came around before, wanting to buy our land. Papa said no. Said that land was ours, been in the family for generations, and he wasn't selling to no mining company for any price.
Mining company?
Black Ridge Mining. They got a claim up north, wanted to expand. Our land was in the way. Ezra met Caleb's eyes. Papa said no. 2 weeks later, our house was on fire. The words hung in the air like smoke. Caleb felt cold settle into his bones, a different kind of cold than the winter outside. He'd seen this before, in his years as a deputy marshal. Powerful men who wanted something and didn't care who got hurt in the taking. You think they did it? The mining company? I don't think nothing. I know. But knowing don't matter when you're a kid with no proof and no money and no one who'll listen. Ezra's voice was bitter as winter wind. Sheriff in Millbrook said it was probably an accident. Said we were lucky to be alive. Offered to send us to an orphanage in Cheyenne. His lip curled. I know what happens to kids in them places. We ran instead. You've been running since then? 8 months. We went south first, then west. Figured maybe we could find work somewhere, save up enough money to start over. Ezra laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Turns out nobody wants to hire children. Not for honest work, anyway. Sadie reached over and put her hand on her brother's arm.
Ez, don't.
Don't what? Tell the truth? Ezra pulled away and stood up abruptly. Mister, I appreciate you saving Benny. I do. But don't pretend you can fix what's broken here. Nobody can fix it. Our parents are dead, our home is gone, and the men who did it are still out there, still taking whatever they want from whoever they want. That's just how the world works. Maybe, Caleb said quietly. Or maybe that's just how the world works when good people don't stand up and fight back. Ezra's eyes flashed. You gonna fight the mining company, mister? You gonna take on the men with money and power and guns? Because I tried that. I tried to tell people what happened. You know what I got for it? A beating from the company's hired men and a warning to keep my mouth shut if I wanted my family to stay alive."
Nell gasped. "They beat you? Grown men beat a little boy?"
"I ain't little," Ezra said automatically. But some of the hardness left his face when he looked at her. "I'm sorry, miss. I shouldn't be talking about this. It ain't your problem."
"It is now."
Nell's voice was firm, her small chin lifted.
"Papa says when you see something wrong, you don't look away. You look right at it and you figure out how to make it right. That's what Mama taught him, and that's what he taught me."
Caleb felt his throat tighten, Margaret's words coming out of their daughter's mouth. Some days he could almost believe she was still with them, living on through Nell's kindness and courage. "Your daughter's got spirit," Ezra said grudgingly. "She gets it from her mother." Silence fell over the cabin. Outside, the wind howled against the walls, but inside it was warm. The fire crackled. Benny's soft breathing filled the quiet spaces. And slowly, gradually, the tension in the room began to ease. Tommy had fallen asleep against Sadie's shoulder, his face peaceful for the first time all day. Sadie herself was fighting to keep her eyes open, exhaustion winning the battle against wariness. Even Ezra, despite his best efforts, was starting to slump.
"Sleep," Caleb said. "All of you. We'll figure out the rest in the morning."
"Where?" Sadie asked. "We can't."
"There's blankets by the fire. It'll be warm there. Ezra can take the floor in the loft. Nell, you'll share your bed with Sadie. Any objections?" There were none. The children were too tired to argue, too worn down by months of fear and hunger and cold. One by one, they settled into their places, and one by one, they fell asleep. All except Ezra. Caleb found him by the window near midnight, staring out at the snow-covered mountains. The boy didn't turn when Caleb approached, but his shoulders tensed. "Can't sleep?"
"I don't sleep much. Not me more."
"Nightmares?" A pause.
"Something like that."
Caleb stood beside him, looking out at the same view. The moon was bright tonight, turning the snow to silver. It was beautiful in a stark and lonely way. The kind of beauty that could kill you if you weren't careful.
"I spent 8 years as a deputy marshal," Caleb said quietly.
"Saw a lot of things I wish I hadn't. Did a lot of things I wish I hadn't. When Margaret got sick, I told myself I was done with all that. Told myself I'd build a quiet life, far from trouble, where nothing bad could touch us. How'd that work out for you? She died anyway, and I learned that you can't run from the world. It finds you wherever you go." Ezra was quiet for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I see myself in you. That hard shell you're wearing, the one that says nothing can hurt you because you won't let it. I know that shell. I built one just like it after Margaret died. Thought it would protect me." He turned to look at the boy. "It doesn't. It just makes you lonely." "Better lonely than dead." "Is it?" Ezra finally looked at him, really looked at him, and for just a moment the shell cracked again, and Caleb saw the terrified child underneath. The boy who'd watched his parents die, who'd spent 8 months trying to keep his family alive in a world that didn't care if they lived or died.
"I'm so tired,"
Ezra whispered.
"I'm so tired of being scared all the time."
"I know, son. I know."
"Don't call me that. I ain't your son."
"No, you're not." Caleb put his hand on Ezra's shoulder. "But you could be, if you wanted. You and your brothers and your sister. This cabin's too quiet anyway. Has been since Margaret died. Maybe what it needs is some noise." Ezra stared at him.
"You're crazy."
"Probably."
"You don't even know us."
"I know enough."
"We're trouble. The mining company. They're still out there. They're still looking for ways to make sure we don't talk about what really happened. You take us in, you're taking that on too.
I've faced worse.
Have you?
Caleb thought about the war, about the things he'd done and seen,
About the outlaws he'd hunted, and the bullets he'd taken, and the graves he'd dug for men who'd been his friends.
Yeah, he said, I have. And I'm still standing. So are you. Maybe between the two of us, we could stand a little stronger. Ezra didn't respond, but he didn't pull away either. And when Caleb finally turned to go back to his own bed, the boy followed. One night, Ezra said again, his voice uncertain now. That's all I promised. One night, Caleb agreed. But they both knew it was more than that already. They both knew something had changed in that frozen alley, something that couldn't be uncharged. These children had found their way into Caleb's heart the same way Nell had, through vulnerability and courage, and the simple, terrible need to be loved. He'd tried to close himself off after Margaret died, tried to build walls high enough that nothing could hurt him again. But his daughter had shown him the truth today. Some walls were meant to be broken. Some hearts were meant to be opened. And some families were built not from blood, but from choice. In the morning, they would face whatever came next: the mining company, the law, the judgment of a town that had already written these children off as lost causes. They would face it together, because that's what family did. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, for the first time in 8 months, 4 broken children would sleep safe and warm. And for the first time in 3 years, Caleb Thornton would go to sleep knowing that his house felt like a home again. The fire burned low as the night deepened. Outside, the wind died down, and the snow fell soft and silent, covering the world in white. And in the small cabin on the mountain, 6 people slept, dreaming of things they'd thought lost forever: hope, safety, family. It was just beginning. Dawn came slow and gray, the winter sun struggling to break through clouds heavy with the promise of more snow.
Caleb woke before the others, his body trained by years of early mornings and hard work. He lay still for a moment, listening to the unfamiliar sounds that filled his cabin. The soft breathing of children, the occasional shift of small bodies seeking warmth, the quiet murmur of someone dreaming. He'd forgotten what it felt like, having a house full of life. Moving carefully so as not to wake anyone, he slipped out of bed and started the morning fire. The coals from last night still held some heat, and within minutes he had flames licking at fresh logs. The warmth spread slowly through the cabin, pushing back the cold that had crept in during the night. Benny was the first to stir. The little boy sat up in his nest of blankets by the hearth, his golden curls tangled and his eyes still heavy with sleep. He looked around the cabin with confusion, then wonder, then something that might have been fear. "It's all right," Caleb said softly, crouching down beside him. "You're safe. Remember, you came home with us last night." Benny's lower lip trembled. "Where's Sadie? Where's Ezra?" "Right here, Benny." Sadie appeared from Nell's room, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She knelt beside her brother and pulled him into her arms. "We're all here. We're all okay." "I was scared. I thought I dreamed you." "No dream, little one. We're real." Caleb stood and moved to the kitchen area, giving them space. He'd learned long ago that some moments weren't meant for strangers, even strangers who were trying to help. He busied himself with breakfast instead, pulling out eggs and bacon from the cold box, measuring coffee into the pot. Mel came padding out in her nightgown, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Papa, are they still here?" "They're still here." Her face lit up with a smile that reminded him so much of Margaret it hurt. "Good.
I was afraid they'd leave in the night.
So was I, sweetheart.
Ezra came down from the loft last, his movements careful and watchful. He stood at the base of the ladder for a long moment, taking in the scene. His siblings gathered by the fire, Caleb cooking breakfast, Nell chattering happily about something or other. Like a family, or something close to it. "Morning," Caleb said. Ezra nodded. "Morning. How'd you sleep?" "I didn't." Caleb didn't push. Some wounds needed time before they could be examined. He just gestured toward the table. "Sit. Food'll be ready soon." They ate together, all 6 of them crowded around the small table again. The Cole children were less desperate this morning, their movements slower, more careful. But they still ate like they weren't sure when their next meal would come. Old habits died hard. Tommy sat between Sadie and Ezra, his eyes fixed on his plate. His hand moved occasionally, tracing patterns on the wood of the table. Letters, Caleb realized. The boy was writing letters with his finger.
"What's he spelling?" Caleb asked quietly. Sadie looked down at Tommy's hand. Her face crumpled.
Home. He's spelling home.
The word hung in the air like a prayer.
This can be home, Mel said. If you want it to be. Right, Papa?
Caleb opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, the sound of hoofbeats cut through the morning quiet. Multiple horses, moving fast up the trail toward the cabin. Ezra was on his feet instantly, his body tense as a coiled spring. "They found us."
"Who found you?"
"The company. Blackridge. They've been looking for us since we ran." Ezra's voice was flat, but his hands were shaking. "I knew it was too good. I knew we couldn't just—"
"Ezra."
Caleb's voice was calm, steady.
"Take your brothers and sister into the back room. Stay there until I come get you."
"But—"
"Do it. Now."
Something in this tone must have gotten through, because Ezra nodded and started herding his siblings toward the bedroom. Sadie scooped up Benny, who had started to cry. Tommy followed silently, his face blank. Mel grabbed Caleb's hand.
"Papa, what's happening?"
"I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I need you to go with them. Keep them calm. Can you do that for me?"
"Yes, Papa."
She ran after the others, and Caleb heard the bedroom door close behind her. He took a deep breath, then another. Then he reached for his gun belt hanging by the door and strapped it on. The riders came into view as he stepped onto the porch. 4 men on horseback, their breath and the horse's breath creating clouds of mist in the cold air. The leader was a tall man in a dark coat and bowler hat, his face sharp and calculating. Behind him rode 3 others, rougher looking, with the casual menace of men who enjoyed having power over others. Caleb recognized the type. He'd spent 8 years dealing with their kind. The leader reined in his horse a few yards from the porch, his eyes sweeping over the cabin, the barn, the fenced pasture, taking inventory, calculating value. "Mr. Thornton, I presume?" "That's right. And you are?" "Victor Crane, Regional Manager for Black Ridge Mining Company." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I believe you have something that belongs to us." "That's so. And what might that be?" 4 children, the Cole orphans. Word reached us that they were seen in your company yesterday, in town." Caleb leaned against the porch rail, his posture casual, but his hand near his gun. "What's a mining company want with orphaned children?" Crane's smile tightened. "Their parents died owing the company a significant debt. Room and board, equipment costs, various advances. The children are, shall we say, collateral until that debt is settled." Collateral. Caleb let the word hang in the air. "You're telling me you own those children?" "I'm telling you the law is on our side, Mr. Thornton. Their parents signed contracts, legal, binding contracts. When they died, the obligation transferred to their surviving family. The children work off the debt, or they face consequences." They're children. The oldest is 11 years old. Old enough to work. Old enough to honor their family's commitments. Crane's voice hardened. Now, I've tried to be civil about this. I've explained the situation. I'd appreciate it if you'd bring the children out so we can settle this matter peacefully. And if I don't? One of the men behind Crane, a thick-necked brute with a scar across his cheek, shifted in his saddle. His hand moved toward his gun. Crane raised a hand, stopping him. Let's not make this unpleasant, Mr. Thornton. You seem like a reasonable man, a rancher living out here alone with his daughter. You don't want trouble with the company. We have resources, connections, the law on our side. The law. Caleb straightened, his easy posture gone. Let me tell you something about the law, Mr. Crane. I spent 8 years as a deputy marshal in this territory. I know what the law says, and I know what men like you do to twist it. Debt bondage is illegal. Has been since the war. You can't force children to work off their parents' debts, no matter what contracts got signed. Something flickered in Crane's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recalculation. You were a marshal. Was. Still got friends in that line of work. Still know how to file charges and make them stick. Caleb stepped to the edge of the porch. Now here's what I know. Those children's parents didn't die in an accident. They were murdered. Their farm was burned down because they wouldn't sell their land to your company. And now you're here trying to take their children, probably so they can't tell anyone what really happened. Crane's face went rigid. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Thornton. It's the truth. I've seen it before. Powerful men who want something and don't care who gets hurt in the taking. You thought those kids would disappear, didn't you? Figured they'd starve or freeze or get picked up by some orphanage where nobody would listen to their story. But they survived. And now they've got someone willing to fight for them. You don't want to make an enemy of Black Ridge Mining, Mr. Thornton. Maybe not. But I definitely don't want to hand over 4 children to be worked to death in your mines. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn your horses around and ride out of here. And you're going to tell whoever sent you that those children are under my protection now. Anyone who tries to take them will answer to me. Crane stared at him for a long moment. The man with the scar, the one Caleb had pegged as the muscle, looked ready to draw his gun. But Crane raised his hand again. This isn't over, Mr. Thornton. We'll be back with proper legal authority, a sheriff perhaps, or a territorial marshal. And when we come, you'll hand those children over or face charges yourself. Then I'll see you when you come, but you won't find me any easier to deal with. Crane's smile was thin as a knife's edge. We'll see about that. He wheeled his horse around, and the 4 men rode back down the trail, disappearing into the trees. Caleb stood on the porch until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. The bedroom door creaked open behind him. Ezra's voice was barely a whisper. Are they gone? They're gone, for now. The boy stepped onto the porch, his face pale. You shouldn't have done that. You made them angry. They'll come back with more men, more guns. They'll... Ezra. Caleb turned to face him. What did your father look like? The question caught Ezra off guard. What? Your father. What did he look like? He was tall. Not as tall as you. Brown hair, like mine. He had a scar on his chin from a farming accident when he was young. Ezra's voice softened. He used to tell us about it. Said he learned to be more careful after that. What about your mother? She was beautiful. Long dark hair, brown eyes. She used to sing while she worked. Old songs from her grandmother. Tears welled in Ezra's eyes, but he blinked them back. Why are you asking me this? Because I want you to remember them. Remember who they were, not just how they died. They raised 4 children who survived 8 months on the street when anyone else would have given up. They taught you to protect your family, to fight for what's right. That's what you carry with you, Ezra. Not the fear, not the running. Them. Ezra was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly Caleb almost missed it, he said, "Papa used to say that. He used to say the measure of a man wasn't what he had, but what he was willing to fight for." Your papa was a wise man.
He was the best man I ever knew. Ezra looked up at Caleb. Until maybe now. Caleb put his hand on the boy's shoulder. I ain't anywhere close to best, but I'm stubborn as hell, and I don't like bullies. That'll have to do for now. The next few days passed in a strange kind of peace. Caleb kept watch on the trail, alert for any sign of Crane's return. But the men didn't come back. Maybe they were regrouping, planning their next move. Or maybe Caleb's threat had given them pause. Either way, the reprieve was welcome. The children began to settle into the rhythms of ranch life. Ezra threw himself into work with a desperate energy, as if he could earn his place through sheer effort. He mucked out stalls, hauled water, split wood, and never once complained. Caleb had to force him to stop and rest, to eat, to sleep. You don't have to prove anything, Caleb told him one afternoon, finding the boy chopping wood in the bitter cold. You're not here because you're useful. You're here because you need a home. Ezra's axe paused mid-swing. I don't know how to just be here. I don't know how to stop working. I know, but you're going to learn, even if I have to tie you to a chair. Sadie was different. She moved through the cabin like a ghost at first, as if she was afraid of taking up too much space. But Nell latched onto her with the fierce determination of a lonely child who'd found a friend. And slowly, Sadie began to open up. Caleb found them in the barn one afternoon, Sadie showing Nell how to braid horsehair. They were laughing about something, their heads bent close together, and the sound of it filled a hollow place in Caleb's chest that had been empty for 3 years. She's good with Nell, he said to Ezra, who had followed him out. Ezra nodded. Sadie's always been the gentle one. Mama used to say she got all the softness, while I got all the stubborn. Nothing wrong with stubborn. That's what Papa said too. Benny was the easiest to reach. He was young enough that the horrors of the past 8 months hadn't hardened him completely. He followed Caleb around the ranch like a shadow, asking endless questions about the horses, the chickens, the mountains in the distance. He laughed easily and cried easily, his emotions still close to the surface in the way of very young children. "Mr. Caleb?" he asked one morning, tugging on Caleb's coat while he fixed a fence post. "Are you going to be our papa now?" The question hit Caleb like a fist to the chest. That's a big question, Benny." "Ezra says we shouldn't get used to this place. He says we might have to leave again." The little boy's lower lip trembled. "I don't want to leave. I like it here. I like you and Miss Nell and the horses." Caleb crouched down so he was eye level with the child. "Listen to me, Benny. Whatever happens, wherever you end up, I want you to know something. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be loved, and those things aren't going away no matter what." "But what if the bad men come back?" "Then I'll deal with the bad men." "You promise?" "I promise." Benny threw his arms around Caleb's neck and held on tight. And Caleb held him back, feeling the small body trembling against his, and knew that he'd meant every word. He would deal with the bad men, whatever it took. Tommy was the hardest to reach. The middle boy remained silent, his eyes distant, his movements mechanical. He ate when food was put in front of him. He slept when he was told to sleep. He followed his siblings from room to room, but he never spoke,
never laughed, never cried. Has he always been like this? Caleb asked Sadie one evening, watching Tommy trace letters on the frost-covered window.
No, before the fire he was the loudest of all of us. Couldn't get him to stop talking. Mommy used to say his mouth ran faster than his brain.
Sadie's voice caught.
But that night, when the fire, he saw them.
Saw Mama and Papa. Saw what happened to them. He hasn't said a word since. What did he see? Sadie was quiet for a long moment. I don't know exactly. We were all running, everything was burning, and Tommy, he went back, tried to help. Ezra had to drag him out. She wiped her eyes. Whatever he saw in there, it broke something inside him. Caleb watched the boy trace letters on the glass. Home. He was spelling home again, over and over, like a prayer he couldn't stop repeating. That night, Caleb sat down beside Tommy while the others were preparing for bed. The boy didn't acknowledge him, just kept staring at the fire. "You know," Caleb said quietly, "I had a brother once. His name was Daniel. He was younger than me, like Benny's younger than you. And when we were boys, something bad happened. Outlaws came to our farm. They hurt our parents." Tommy's hand stilled on his knee. I didn't talk for a long time after that. Felt like my voice had just gone away. Like if I spoke, I'd have to admit what happened was real. Caleb paused. But eventually, I found it again. My voice. It came back slow, a little bit at a time. And when it did, I found out that talking about the hard things made them easier to carry. Tommy turned his head, just slightly. His eyes met Caleb's for the first time. You don't have to talk now. You don't have to talk ever if you don't want to. But if you do want to, someday, when you're ready, I'll be here to listen, okay? The boy didn't respond, but something in his expression shifted just a little. A crack in the wall he'd built around himself. It was enough. It was a start. A week passed, then two. The snow fell and melted and fell again. Caleb taught Ezra to ride properly, the boy a natural in the saddle despite his lack of experience. Sadie took over the kitchen with quiet efficiency, producing meals that were better than anything Caleb had managed in 3 years of cooking for himself. Benny and Nell became inseparable, racing around the ranch like wild things, their laughter echoing off the mountains. And slowly, so slowly it was almost imperceptible, the cabin became a home again. But Caleb knew it couldn't last. Crane would be back. Men like him always came back. They couldn't afford to let defiance stand, couldn't afford to let anyone see that their power had limits. The attack came on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks after Crane's first visit. Caleb was in the barn, checking on a mare who'd been acting strange, when he heard Nell scream. He grabbed his rifle and ran, his heart hammering against his ribs, and burst into the yard to find chaos. 4 men on horseback had surrounded the children, who'd been playing in the snow. Ezra stood in front of his siblings, his fists raised, just like he'd stood in that alley in town. But these men weren't deterred by a child's defiance. One of them, the thick-necked brute from Crane's first visit, leaned down from his saddle and grabbed Benny by the arm, hauling the screaming child up onto his horse. "Let him go!" Ezra launched himself at the man, but another rider kicked him hard, sending him sprawling in the snow. Caleb raised his rifle. "Drop the boy, now!" The men turned. The one holding Benny pressed a knife against the child's throat. "Easy, Mr. Thornton. We're just collecting what's owed. Mr. Crane sends his regards." "I said drop him." "And I said we're collecting what's owed." The man's smile was ugly. "Now you can shoot me if you want, but this knife might slip. Accidents happen, you know, just like they happen to these children's parents." Caleb's blood ran cold. "You admit it. You killed their parents." "I ain't admitting nothing.
I'm just saying accidents happen. Houses catch fire. People get hurt. The man tightened his grip on Benny, who was crying now, his small body shaking with terror.
And unless you want more accidents to happen, you're going to put that rifle down and let us take what we came for. Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. He could make the shot. He'd made harder shots in worse conditions. But the risk...
Papa! Nell's voice cut through the chaos. She stepped forward, her small face set with determination. Papa, put the gun down. Nell, get back. No, they'll hurt Benny. Put the gun down. She was right, and he knew it. Caleb lowered the rifle, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. Good decision. The man with the knife jerked his head at the others. Grab the rest of them. We're taking all 4. No! Sadie screamed as rough hands grabbed her. Tommy struggled silently, his face blank with terror. Ezra fought like a wildcat, but he was just a child, and there were too many of them. Caleb watched, helpless, as the men bound the children's hands and loaded them onto horses. His rifle lay in the snow at his feet.
His heart pounded with rage and despair. "This ain't over," he said. The man with the knife laughed. "Sure it is, Mr. Thornton. You had your chance to walk away clean. Now you're going to watch these kids disappear, and there ain't a damn thing you can do about it." "I'll find them. I'll bring them back." "You can try, but by the time you figure out where they are, they'll be deep in the mines, working off their family's debt. Nobody cares about orphans, Mr. Thornton. Nobody's coming to save them." The men rode out, taking the children with them. Ezra's voice carried back through the cold air. "Mr. Caleb, don't let them—" And then they were gone, swallowed by the trees, leaving only hoofprints in the snow. Nell threw herself at Caleb, sobbing. "Papa, they took them! They took them all!" Caleb held his daughter tight, staring at the trail where the men had disappeared. His hands were shaking. His whole body was shaking. "Papa, what are we going to do?" Caleb's jaw set. The helplessness was fading now, replaced by something colder, harder. The thing that had made him good at his job all those years ago. We're going to get them back. How? He picked up his rifle from the snow and checked the action. His movements were calm now, controlled. The rage was still there, but it was channeled, focused. First, we go to town. We tell the sheriff what happened. We tell everyone what happened. Then we find out where Black Ridge is taking them. And then we go get them. But Papa, those men had guns. There were so many of them. I know, sweetheart. Caleb looked down at his daughter, at the tears streaming down her face, at the fierce determination in her eyes. So like her mother. So brave, even when she was terrified. But you know what else I know? Those children trusted us to protect them. They trusted us to be their family. And family doesn't give up on each other. Not ever. He took Nell's hand and led her toward the barn where the horses were waiting. Come on, we've got work to do. The sun was climbing higher now, burning off the morning clouds. Somewhere out there, 4 children were being taken back into hell. But they weren't alone anymore. They had someone fighting for them. And Caleb Thornton wasn't going to stop until he brought them home. The ride to town took less than an hour. Caleb pushed the horses hard, Nell clinging to his back, her small arms wrapped tight around his waist. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say that action couldn't say better. Sheriff Tom Hadley was standing outside his office when they rode in, talking to a group of men Caleb didn't recognize. He looked up as Caleb dismounted, and something in Caleb's face must have shown, because his expression shifted immediately from casual to alert. Thornton, what happened? Black Ridge took them. 4 children I had under my protection. They came to my ranch this morning, held a knife to the youngest one's throat, and rode off with all of them. Hadley's jaw tightened. You sure it was Black Ridge? The man who did it mentioned Crane by name, said he was collecting what was owed. Caleb's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. Those children's parents were murdered, Tom. The fire that killed them wasn't an accident. It was arson, meant to clear them off land the company wanted. And now they've got the only witnesses. One of the men Hadley had been talking to stepped forward. He was older, maybe 60, with white hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're making serious accusations, Mr. Thornton." "I'm stating facts. Who are you?" "Judge Solomon Whitmore. I'm here on circuit from the territorial capital." The judge's expression was unreadable. "And I've been hearing rumors about Black Ridge mining for some time now. Nothing I could act on. Nothing concrete." "I can give you concrete. I can give you 4 children who saw their parents murdered. I can give you testimony from men who've been threatened, families who've been run off their land." Caleb stepped closer. "But first, I need to get those children back before they disappear into the mines and nobody ever sees them again." Whitmore and Hadley exchanged a look. Something passed between them, a silent communication born of shared concern. "How many men took them?" Hadley asked. 4, armed. They headed north, probably toward the mining camp at Black Ridge." "That's company land. I don't have jurisdiction there." "Then we go anyway." Caleb's voice hardened. "I'm not asking for permission, Tom. I'm asking for help. But with or without it, I'm going after those children."
"Papa means it," Nell said, her small voice cutting through the tension. "He promised he'd bring them home. And Papa doesn't break promises."
Hadley looked at the little girl, then at Caleb, then at Judge Whitmore. He let out a long breath. "Hell, I reckon I'm tired of watching that company do whatever they want anyway." He turned to the men who'd been listening. "Any of you boys want to ride with us?" A murmur went through the group. Then one man stepped forward, a rancher Caleb recognized from previous trips to town. "I'll go. My brother worked for Black Ridge 2 years back. They worked him to death and sent his body home in a pine box. Said it was an accident." Another man joined him, then another. Within minutes, a dozen men had volunteered, their faces grim with determination. Clara Hendricks pushed through the crowd, her eyes finding Caleb.
"I heard what happened. Those sweet children."
"I'm going to get them back, Clara."
"I know you are."
She pressed something into his hand, a small pistol, easily concealed.
"Take this, just in case."
Caleb looked at the weapon, then at her. "Thank you."
"Bring them home, Caleb. Bring all of them home."
Judge Whitmore stepped forward. "Mr. Thornton, I want to be clear about something. What you're planning to do could be considered vigilantism. If things go wrong, if people get hurt, there could be legal consequences." "I understand." "I don't think you do." The judge's eyes were sharp, but not unkind. "I'm going with you, not as a judge, but as a witness. If Black Ridge has been doing what you say they've been doing, I want to see it with my own eyes. And if those children are being held against their will, I want to be there when they're freed."
"You'd do that?"
"Son, I've spent 30 years watching powerful men get away with things that would put ordinary folks in prison. I'm tired of it." Whitmore's jaw set. "Sometimes the law needs to be carried to the lawless. That's what I intend to do today." They rode out within the hour. 14 men in total, armed and determined. Nell stayed behind with Clara, crying as she watched them go, but understanding why she couldn't come.
"Bring them back, Papa,"
She'd said, hugging him tight.
"Bring my brothers and sister back."
My brothers and sister. The words echoed in Caleb's mind as they rode north. Somewhere along the way, without him noticing, those 4 broken children had become family. Not just to him, but to Nell, too. The trail to Black Ridge wound through dense forest, climbing steadily into the mountains. Caleb pushed the pace as fast as he dared,
knowing that every hour that passed was an hour those children spent in fear. "You know this could be a trap," Hadley said, riding beside him. "Crane might be expecting us." "Probably is. And you're going anyway. What would you do, Tom, if it was your children?" Hadley was quiet for a moment. "Same thing, I reckon. Doesn't make it smart. Smart stopped mattering the moment they put a knife to that little boy's throat." They reached the mining camp as the sun was beginning to sink toward the western peaks. It was bigger than Caleb had expected, a sprawling collection of buildings and equipment spread across a scarred landscape. Smoke rose from a dozen chimneys. The sound of machinery carried through the cold air. And everywhere, men with guns. "That's a lot of firepower," one of the volunteers muttered. "It is." Caleb studied the camp, looking for any sign of the children. "But they're not expecting a fight. They're expecting us to come begging, maybe with a lawyer. They're not expecting this." "What exactly are we expecting?" Hadley asked. "I'm expecting to walk in there, find those children, and walk out with them. Anyone who tries to stop us will regret it." Judge Whitmore moved his horse up beside Caleb's. "Let me go first. As a territorial judge, I have authority here that even the company has to respect. If I can get Crane to release the children legally, that's better for everyone." "And if he won't?" "Then we do things your way." They rode into the camp in a loose formation, Whitmore at the front, Caleb and Hadley flanking him. The other men spread out behind, hands near their weapons, but not drawing. Not yet. Workers stopped to stare as they passed. Guards moved to intercept them, but something in the group's collective demeanor made them hesitate. These weren't supplicants come to beg. These were men with purpose. Victor Crane emerged from the largest building before they reached it, flanked by the thick-necked man who'd taken Benny. Silas Murdoch, Caleb remembered. That was the brute's name. "Judge Whitmore." Crane's voice was smooth, controlled. "This is an unexpected pleasure. What brings a territorial judge to our humble operation?" "You know why I'm here, Crane. 4 children were taken from a ranch this morning at knife point. I have reason to believe they were brought here." "Children?" Crane's expression was one of innocent confusion. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play games with me," Whitmore's voice sharpened. "The Cole children. Orphans. Their parents died in a farm on their farm 8 months ago. A fire that I'm now told may have been deliberately set." Something flickered in Crane's eyes. Fear? Calculation? Both? "Those are serious accusations, Your Honor. I hope you have evidence to support them. I have witnesses. I have testimony. And I have 14 armed men who are prepared to search every inch of this camp if necessary." Whitmore leaned forward in his saddle. "Now, you can make this easy, or you can make it hard. But one way or another, I'm leaving here with those children." Crane glanced at Murdoch, then at the guards gathering behind them. He was calculating odds, Caleb could see it, weighing the cost of resistance against the cost of compliance. "Even if these children were here," Crane said slowly, "which I'm not admitting they are, the company has a legal claim. Their parents signed contracts. Debt bondage is illegal, Mr. Crane. It has been since 1867. Any contracts requiring children to work off their parents' debts are null and void." Whitmore's voice was cold as the wind. "You know this. Your lawyers know this. You've been betting that nobody would challenge you, that nobody would care about a few orphaned children. You bet wrong." Crane's mask slipped. Anger flashed across his face, quickly controlled, but not quickly enough. "You're making a mistake, Judge. Black Ridge Mining has powerful friends, investors in Boston, politicians in Washington. You don't want to—" "I don't want to what? Do my job?" Whitmore's laugh was humorless. "I've been doing this job for 30 years, Mr. Crane. I faced down outlaws, corrupt politicians, and men who thought their money put them above the law. You don't frighten me. Then maybe this will. Murdoch stepped forward, his hand on his gun. Way I see it, you're trespassing on private property.
Anything happens to you here, well, accidents happen in mining country. Everyone knows that. Is that a threat? Hadley's voice was dangerous. Just an observation, Sheriff. Caleb had heard enough. He dismounted in one fluid motion and walked toward Murdoch, his stride unhurried, but his eyes hard as flint. I want to make something clear, he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet camp. I don't care about your company. I don't care about your investors or your politicians or your money. I care about 4 children who you kidnapped this morning. 4 children who saw you murder their parents. 4 children who trusted me to protect them. He stopped 3 feet from Murdoch, close enough to see the uncertainty flickering in the man's eyes. Now, you can give them back, and we all walk away from this. Or you can try to stop us and find out exactly what a man will do when you threaten his family. Caleb's hand rested on his gun. Your choice. Murdoch's face twisted with contempt. You think you scare me? You're just one man. I was a deputy marshal for 8 years. I've killed more men than I care to count. You want to be one more? Caleb's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Because I promise you, if anything happens to those children, I will hunt you to the ends of the earth. I will find you wherever you hide, and I will make sure the last thing you see is my face. The camp had gone absolutely still. Every eye was on them. The tension stretched taut as wire. Then, from somewhere behind the main building, a child's voice cut through the silence. Mr. Caleb! Benny. It was Benny's voice, high and frightened, but alive. Caleb moved before anyone could stop him. He shoved past Murdoch, ignoring the man's snarl of protest, and ran toward the sound. Behind him, he heard shouting, the thunder of footsteps, but he didn't stop. He found them in a storage shed behind the main building. All 4 of them, hands bound, huddled together in the corner. Ezra's face was bloody, his lips split. Sadie was crying silently, her arms wrapped around Tommy and Benny. Tommy's eyes were blank, empty, retreated somewhere deep inside himself. I'm here, Caleb said, dropping to his knees beside them. I'm here. It's okay. You're safe now. I knew you'd come. Benny's voice was thick with tears. I told Ezra. I told him you'd come. Course I came. Caleb was working at the ropes binding Ezra's hands, his fingers clumsy with urgency. I promised, didn't I? Family doesn't give up on each other. Ezra's composure cracked. Tears spilled down his cheeks, mixing with the blood from his split lip. They said nobody would come. They said we were nothing. They said... They were wrong. Caleb got the ropes free and pulled the boy into a fierce embrace. They were wrong about everything. The sound of boots made him turn. Hadley and several of the volunteers had followed him, guns drawn, forming a protective barrier at the shed's entrance. Beyond them, Caleb could see Crane arguing with Judge Whitmore, his face red with fury. Get them out of here, Caleb said to Hadley. Get them to safety. I'll deal with Crane. Caleb. Please, Tom. Just get them safe. Hadley nodded. He and the others moved in, helping the children to their feet, surrounding them protectively as they made their way toward the horses. Sadie was carrying Benny, who had wrapped his arms around her neck and refused to let go. Ezra walked with his head high, despite his injuries. Tommy moved like a sleepwalker, his hand in Sadie's. Caleb watched them go, making sure they reached safety before he turned back to face Crane and Murdoch. This isn't over, Crane was saying to Whitmore. I'll have your position for this. I'll see you disbarred.
ruined.
You can try. Whitmore's voice was calm.
But I don't think you're in a position to threaten anyone right now. Those children will testify to what they saw. Combined with the evidence I've been gathering for months, I have more than enough to bring charges against you and your entire operation. Evidence. What evidence? Letters, contracts, testimony from workers you've abused, families you've threatened, communities you've destroyed. Whitmore smiled thinly. Did you think nobody was watching, Mr. Crane? Did you think you could do whatever you wanted forever? Crane's face went pale. For the first time, Caleb saw real fear in his eyes. I want names, Whitmore continued. Names of everyone involved in the coal fire. Names of the men who set it, who ordered it, who covered it up. Give me those names, and I'll recommend leniency when this goes to trial. I don't know what you're talking about. Then let me be more specific. Whitmore's voice hardened. Ezra Cole is 11 years old. He watched his parents burn to death. He spent 8 months on the streets, protecting his siblings, starving, freezing, being hunted by your men. And when he gets on a witness stand and tells a jury what he saw, what he experienced, what your company did to his family. The judge leaned in. There won't be a person in the territory who doesn't want to see you hang. Crane looked around wildly, as if searching for escape. But there was none. His guards had backed away, unwilling to draw on a judge and a sheriff and a dozen armed men. Murdoch was standing rigid, his hand still on his gun, but his eyes uncertain. It was Murdoch, Crane said suddenly. What? Murdoch's head whipped around. He set the fire. He and 2 of his men. I told him to make the Coles an offer. I didn't tell him to kill them. You lying son of a... Murdoch reached for his gun. Caleb drew faster. The shot echoed across the camp, and Murdoch staggered, clutching his shoulder, his weapon falling from suddenly nerveless fingers. That was for Ezra, Caleb said, his voice cold. The next one's for his parents. Wait. Murdoch's face was twisted with pain and fear. Wait. I can tell you everything. Everything you want to know. Just don't... Start talking. The story came out in pieces, broken by pain and desperation. How the mining company had wanted the Cole farm for its mineral rights. How James Cole had refused to sell. How Crane had ordered Murdoch to persuade the family. How that persuasion had escalated to arson, to murder, to hunting the surviving children across half the territory. Judge Whitmore listened to all of it, his face growing grimmer with every word. When Murdoch finally fell silent, the judge turned to Hadley. Sheriff, I want both of these men in custody. Charges of murder, kidnapping, assault, conspiracy, and whatever else I can think of between here and the jail. Hadley nodded. With pleasure, Your Honor. As Crane and Murdoch were led away in chains, Caleb felt something ease in his chest. Justice. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't bring back the children's parents. But it was something. It was a start. He walked back to where the children were waiting, surrounded by the men who'd ridden with him. Ezra was the first to see him coming. The boy broke away from the group and ran, throwing himself into Caleb's arms with a force that nearly knocked him over. You did it, Ezra said, his voice muffled against Caleb's chest. You actually did it. We did it. Together. Is it over? Is it really over? Caleb looked over Ezra's head at the mining camp, at Crane being led away in chains, at Whitmore already organizing men to secure evidence. Then he looked back at the boy in his arms, at Sadie and Tommy and Benny waiting nearby, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief, and something that looked like hope. Yeah, he said softly. It's over. You're safe now. All of you. Sadie came forward, her eyes bright with tears. Mr. Caleb, I don't know how to thank you.
You don't have to thank me." Caleb reached out and drew her into the embrace with Ezra. "That's not how family works." Benny wiggled free from the volunteer who'd been holding him and launched himself at Caleb's legs.
I knew you'd come. I told them. I said Mr. Caleb would come and save us because he's our papa now.
The word hit Caleb like a physical blow. Papa. This child, this little boy who'd been through so much, who'd been abandoned and hunted and nearly killed, was calling him Papa. He sank to his knees and gathered all four of them close. Ezra, Sadie, Tommy, Benny, 4 children who'd lost everything and somehow found their way to him. "Yeah," he said, his voice thick. "I'm your papa now, if you'll have me." "We'll have you," Ezra said. "We'll have you forever." And standing there in the fading light, surrounded by the evidence of cruelty and the promise of justice, Caleb Thornton finally understood what he'd been missing for 3 years. Not solitude, not safety, not the careful distance he'd built between himself and the world. Family. That's what he'd been missing. And now, against all odds, he'd found it again. The ride home took longer than the ride out. The children were exhausted, traumatized, clinging to Caleb and the others like they were afraid to let go. Caleb rode with Benny in front of him, and Ezra behind, the boy's arms wrapped around his waist. Sadie rode with Hadley, Tommy with one of the volunteers who'd proven gentle enough to earn the silent boy's trust. When they finally crested the last ridge and the cabin came into view, Caleb heard Benny's sharp intake of breath.
Home,
The little boy whispered.
we're home.
"Yeah, little one, we're home." Nell was waiting on the porch with Clara, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. When she saw them coming, she let out a cry and ran, her boots slipping on the frozen ground, but never quite losing her footing.
You came back. You all came back.
She threw herself at them, hugging everyone she could reach, crying and laughing at the same time. Caleb dismounted and swept her up, holding her tight. "Told you I'd bring them home, sweetheart."
I know, Papa. I knew you would.
She wriggled free and grabbed Sadie's hand, then Ezra's.
Come on, come inside. It's warm. I made soup. Well, Clara helped me make soup, but I stirred it myself.
The children followed her inside, and for a moment, Caleb stood alone in the yard, watching them go. His family. His strange, broken, beautiful family. Clara came to stand beside him. "You did a good thing today, Caleb Thornton. Couldn't have done it alone." "No, but you were the one who decided to fight. You were the one who refused to let those children go." She put her hand on his arm. "Margaret would be proud of you." The mention of his wife's name sent a pang through his chest, but not the sharp, crippling pain it used to be. Softer now, easier to bear. "You think so?" "I know so. She loved you for your stubbornness, remember? Said it would either save you or kill you someday." Clara smiled. "Looks like today it saved you. Saved all of them." Caleb looked at the cabin, warm light spilling from the windows, the sound of children's voices drifting out into the cold night air. Something had changed, something fundamental. The silence he'd cultivated for 3 years, the isolation he'd thought he needed, was gone. In its place was noise and chaos and life. It was terrifying. And it was wonderful. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted quietly. "Raise 5 children on my own? Be the father they need? I barely managed with 1. "You're not on your own," Clara's voice was firm. "You've got friends, neighbors, a whole community that saw what you did today. They won't forget, and neither will I." She squeezed his arm, then turned and walked toward her own wagon. At the gate, she paused and looked back. "Besides, something tells me those children are going to raise you just as much as you raise them. That's how family works." She was gone before he could respond. her wagon disappearing down the trail. Caleb stood in the yard for another moment, letting the cold air fill his lungs, letting the reality of everything settle over him. Then he went inside, to his family, and closed the door against the night. The first week after the rescue was the hardest. The children slept in shifts, unable to trust that they were truly safe, unable to believe that no one would come in the night to drag them away. Ezra refused to sleep at all for the first 2 days, positioning himself by the door with a knife he'd found in the kitchen, his eyes red-rimmed but vigilant. Caleb didn't take the knife away. He understood the need to feel in control, even when control was an illusion. Instead, he sat with the boy through those long nights, keeping him company, talking quietly about nothing important, until exhaustion finally won and Ezra slumped against his shoulder. "You don't have to watch anymore," Caleb told him, carefully moving the knife aside and pulling a blanket over the sleeping boy. "That's my job now." Sadie dealt with the trauma differently. She became hyper-vigilant about her brothers, checking on them constantly, counting heads every few minutes, as if she expected one of them to vanish. She barely ate, giving her portions to Benny and Tommy, reverting to the survival patterns that had kept them alive on the streets. Sadie, Caleb found her in the kitchen one morning, scraping the last of her breakfast onto Benny's plate. "Sit down." "I'm not hungry." "Sit down anyway." She sat, her dark eyes wary. Caleb took the chair across from her, close enough to touch but not touching. "Not yet. When's the last time you ate a full meal? A real one, not whatever scraps were left over after everyone else finished." Sadie shrugged. "I don't remember." "That's what I thought." Caleb pushed his own plate toward her. "Eat." "But there's enough food here for everyone. More than enough. You don't have to ration anymore. You don't have to make sure everyone else eats first. That's my job now." He softened his voice. "You're allowed to take care of yourself, Sadie. You're allowed to be a child." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to do that anymore." "Then we'll learn together." She ate. Not much at first, but more than she had been. And slowly, over the following days, she began to relax, to trust that the food wouldn't run out, that no one was going to take it away. Tommy remained the most difficult to reach. The middle boy hadn't spoken since the fire, and the trauma of the kidnapping had only driven him deeper into silence. He moved through the cabin like a ghost, present, but not present, his eyes seeing things no one else could see. Caleb tried everything he could think of. He talked to Tommy, read to him, sat with him in companionable silence. Nothing seemed to break through the wall the boy had built around himself. It was Nell who finally found the key. She came running into the cabin one afternoon, breathless with excitement. "Papa, Papa, come quick! Tommy's doing something!" Caleb followed her to the barn, where Tommy was crouched in the corner, his back to them. As they got closer, Caleb saw what had captured Nell's attention. Tommy was drawing in the dirt floor, using a stick to create intricate images. Horses, trees, a cabin with smoke rising from its chimney, and people. A man and a woman and 4 children, standing together in front of the cabin. "He's drawing us," Nell whispered. "He's drawing our family." Caleb knelt beside Tommy, careful not to disturb his work. The boy didn't look up, but his hand paused on the stick. "That's beautiful, Tommy. You've got real talent." No response. But the hand started moving again, adding details. A dog they didn't have. Flowers that wouldn't bloom for months. A sun with rays spreading out in all directions. "You know what I think?" Caleb said quietly. "I think you've got a lot of words inside you. A lot of pictures. And maybe the pictures are easier right now. Maybe they'll always be easier. But either way, I want you to know that I see them. I see what you're trying to say." Tommy's hands stilled. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the boy turned his head and looked at Caleb, really looked at him for the first time since the rescue. His lips moved. No sound came out, but Caleb could read the word. Papa. Yeah, son. Caleb's voice was thick. I'm here. The legal proceedings began a week later. Judge Whitmore had returned to the territorial capital, but he'd left instructions with Sheriff Hadley about the next steps. Crane and Murdoch were in custody, awaiting trial on charges of murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. The mining company's operations had been suspended, pending investigation, and the Cole children needed a legal guardian. You'll have to file papers, Hadley told Caleb when he came to town. Formal adoption requires court approval, witnesses, the whole business. But given the circumstances, I don't think anyone's going to object. How long will it take? Few weeks, maybe. Judge Whitmore wants to handle it personally when he comes back through on circuit. Says he owes you that much. Caleb nodded, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in his stomach. A few weeks. A few weeks of uncertainty, of not knowing if some distant relative might appear to claim the children, of not being able to promise them permanence. What if someone challenges it? He asked. What if the company has connections, lawyers who could... Caleb. Hadley put his hand on the younger man's shoulder. Crane is finished. His investors have abandoned him. His political friends have suddenly developed amnesia about ever knowing him. The only people who might challenge your adoption are the children's blood relatives, and from what Ezra told us, there aren't any. You're sure? I'm sure. Those kids are yours, Caleb. It's just a matter of making it official. The words should have been reassuring, but the anxiety remained. Caleb had lost too much to trust in happy endings. The days that followed were filled with small moments of healing. Benny started laughing again, his infectious giggle ringing through the cabin at all hours. Sadie began helping with meals, not out of survival instinct, but because she genuinely enjoyed cooking. Ezra slowly stopped positioning himself by the door at night, though he still slept with one eye open. And Tommy kept drawing. He drew everywhere, on everything. Scraps of paper, the margins of books, the frost on the windows. His images grew more complex, more detailed. Family scenes mostly. Breakfast around the table, Ezra learning to rope, Sadie teaching Nell to braid hair, Caleb reading by the fire. But sometimes he drew other things. A house in flames, figures running through smoke, two people who never escaped. Caleb found one of those drawings tucked under Tommy's pillow during one of his midnight checks on the children. He sat on the edge of the bed, studying the image by moonlight. The detail was remarkable for a 6-year-old. The terror was palpable. You saw everything, didn't you? Caleb whispered. You saw what happened to your mama and papa. Tommy's eyes opened. He'd been awake the whole time. He looked at Caleb, then at the drawing in his hands, then back at Caleb. It's okay to remember them, Caleb said softly. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay. Tommy sat up slowly. His hand reached out and touched the drawing, tracing the outlines of the two figures who hadn't escaped. His mama, his papa, gone forever. Then he did something he hadn't done since the fire. He started to cry. Great, heaving sobs that shook his small body. Months of grief, of terror, of silence, all pouring out at once. Caleb gathered him up and held him tight, letting the boy cry himself empty. I got you, Caleb murmured. I got you. You're not alone. You're never going to be alone again. The crying lasted a long time. When it finally stopped, Tommy lay limp in Caleb's arms, exhausted, but somehow lighter. The terrible weight he'd been carrying had finally been shared. Papa! The word was barely audible, rusty from months of disuse,
but unmistakably real. Tommy had spoken. "I'm here, son."
I miss them. Mama and Papa. I miss them so much.
"I know. I know you do." Caleb stroked the boy's hair. "And you'll always miss them. That's not going to go away. But missing them and loving us, those things can exist together. You don't have to choose." Tommy was quiet for a moment. Then,
They would have liked you. Mama especially. She always said she could tell a good man by the way he treated children.
"She sounds like a wise woman."
She was the best.
Fresh tears spilled down Tommy's cheeks, but these were different, cleaner somehow. The tears of someone beginning to heal, rather than someone drowning in pain.
Papa used to say she was too good for him, that he spent every day trying to deserve her.
"I know that feeling." Tommy looked up at Caleb. "Your wife? The one who died?" "Margaret, yeah. She was too good for me too. Made me want to be better just by existing." Caleb smiled sadly. "I think that's what love does. It makes you want to deserve it."
Do you still love her?
Every day. Every single day.
Even though she's gone?
Even though she's gone. Caleb tightened his hold on the boy. Death doesn't end love, Tommy. It just changes it. The people we lose, they stay with us. In our memories, in the things they taught us, in the way we live our lives because of them. Your mama and papa are still with you. They'll always be with you. Tommy was quiet for a long time. Then he said, very softly,
I think they'd want me to be happy. I think they'd want me to have a family again.
I think you're right.
So maybe it's okay to let you be my papa. Not instead of my real papa, just also.
Caleb's throat tightened. I'd be honored, Tommy. More than honored.
Okay.
Tommy settled deeper into Caleb's arms.
Okay then.
He fell asleep like that, held and safe. And Caleb sat there through the rest of the night, watching over him, feeling something that had been broken, slowly beginning to mend. The adoption hearing came 3 weeks later. Judge Whitmore arrived in town on a Tuesday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, Caleb and all 5 children were standing in the small courthouse. This is a formal proceeding, Whitmore said from behind his bench, his voice carrying the weight of law and tradition. But I want the children to understand that they're not on trial. No one is in trouble. We're here to make something official that's already true in every way that matters. He looked at each of them in turn. Ezra, standing straight despite his nervousness. Sadie, her hand clasped tight in Nell's. Tommy, present and alert in a way he hadn't been in months. Benny, bouncing on his toes with barely contained excitement. Ezra Cole, please step forward. Ezra walked to the front of the room, his jaw set with determination. Son, I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Do you wish to be adopted by Caleb Thornton, to become his legal son, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails? Yes, sir. Has anyone pressured you or forced you to make this decision? No, sir. It's what I want. What I've wanted since... Ezra's voice caught. Since he came into that alley and saw us. Since he looked at me like I was a person instead of a problem. And you understand that this is permanent, that once this adoption is finalized, Caleb Thornton will be your father in the eyes of the law. I understand. Ezra turned to look at Caleb, and his expression softened. I've never understood anything better in my life. Whitmore smiled. Very well. Sadie Cole, please step forward. The process repeated for each child. Sadie, her voice trembling but clear, speaking of safety and belonging. Tommy, speaking for the first time in public since the fire, his words halting but heartfelt. Benny,
too young to fully understand the legal implications, but absolutely certain about what he wanted.
"I want Mr. Caleb to be my papa," he announced to the courtroom. "He saved us from the bad men. He makes sure we have enough to eat. He reads us stories at night. He's the best papa in the whole world, and I want to keep him forever."
Laughter rippled through the room. Even Whitmore smiled. "I think that covers it," the judge said. "Mr. Thornton, please approach the bench." Caleb walked forward, his heart pounding. This was it. The moment everything became real. "Mr. Thornton, you've heard the children's testimony. You understand the responsibilities you're taking on. 4 children, each of them traumatized, each of them carrying wounds that will take years to heal. This won't be easy." "I know, Your Honor." "Do you still wish to proceed?" Caleb looked back at the children, at Ezra, who'd become his right hand in all things, at Sadie, who'd started humming while she worked, old songs her mother used to sing, at Tommy, who'd finally found his voice again, at Benny, who'd never stopped believing that good things were possible, at Nell, his firstborn, his heart, who'd started all of this with a simple question in a frozen alley. "These children saved my life," Caleb said quietly. "I was dying before they came. Not physically, but in every other way that matters. I'd closed myself off from the world, convinced that caring about anything would only lead to more pain. They showed me I was wrong." He turned back to face the judge. "So yes, Your Honor, I wish to proceed. Not because I'm doing them a favor, but because they've already given me more than I could ever repay. They gave me a reason to keep going. They gave me a family." Whitmore studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Very well. By the authority vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I hereby declare that Ezra, Sadie, Thomas, and Benjamin Cole are legally adopted by Caleb Thornton. From this day forward, they shall be known as Ezra, Sadie, Thomas, and Benjamin Thornton, with all the rights, privileges, and protections that name entails." He brought down his gavel, and the sound echoed through the courtroom like a thunderclap. "Congratulations, Mr. Thornton. You're officially a father of 5. The courtroom erupted. Clara was crying. Sheriff Hadley was grinning. The townsfolk who'd come to witness the proceeding were applauding. And Caleb's children, all 5 of them, were running toward him, crashing into him with a force that nearly knocked him off his feet. "We're Thorntons now," Benny shouted. "We're really Thorntons." "We're family," Sadie breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Really, truly family." Ezra didn't say anything. He just held on, his face buried in Caleb's shoulder, his body shaking with silent sobs. Caleb wrapped his arms around all of them, holding them as tight as he could. His children, his family, official, permanent, real. "Let's go home," he said when he could finally speak. They walked out of the courthouse together, 5 children and their father, into a day that felt brighter than any Caleb could remember. People stopped them on the street to offer congratulations. Children waved from windows. Even the horses seemed to sense that something important had happened. The ride home took longer than usual because Benny insisted on telling everyone they passed that he had a new name and a new papa and a new family. By the time they reached the cabin, word had spread across half the territory. "Papa," Nell tugged at Caleb's sleeve as they dismounted. "I have something for them. For my brothers and sister." "Can I give it to them now?" "What is it, sweetheart?" She ran inside and came back a moment later, carrying something wrapped in cloth. She handed it to Ezra with ceremony. "It was Mama's," she said. "Her favorite. She used to wear it every day. I wanted you to have something of hers too, so you know you're really part of the family." Ezra unwrapped the cloth carefully. Inside was a simple silver locket,
tarnished with age, but still beautiful. He opened it and found a tiny portrait inside. A woman with Mel's eyes and Nell's smile.
"Margaret,"
Caleb said softly, his throat tight.
"That's Margaret. She's pretty,"
Sadie whispered. She was beautiful. Caleb touched the locket gently. And she would have loved all of you. So much. She always wanted a big family. Used to talk about filling this cabin with children, with laughter, with life. "We can do that," Benny said seriously. "We're really good at laughter, aren't we, Tommy?" Tommy smiled. Actually smiled. The first real smile since before the fire.
"Yeah," he said. "We are."
Nell took the locket from Ezra and fastened it around Sadie's neck.
"You should wear it," she said. "You're the oldest sister. Mama would have wanted you to have it."
Sadie's hand went to the locket, her fingers trembling.
"Are you sure?" "I'm sure. We're sisters now. What's mine is yours."
Sadie hugged her fiercely.
"What's mine is yours, too, even though I don't have much." "You have enough," Nell said. "You have us."
That night, after dinner, after stories, after Benny had been carried to bed and Tommy had fallen asleep with his head on Ezra's shoulder, Caleb sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. The cabin behind him was full of noise. Sadie was cleaning up from dinner, humming one of her mother's songs. Nell was trying to teach Ezra to play cat's cradle with a piece of string. In the loft, Tommy was drawing by candlelight, pictures of the family he'd found, against all odds. This was what he'd been afraid of, Caleb realized. Not the danger, not the responsibility, not even the pain of potentially losing them. He'd been afraid of this, of loving again, of letting people in, of having something precious that could be taken away. But the fear didn't control him anymore. It was still there, probably always would be, but it was smaller now, outweighed by something stronger. Hope. That's what it was. Hope that tomorrow would be good. Hope that these children would heal. Hope that he could be the father they deserved. The door opened behind him, and Ezra stepped out onto the porch. "Couldn't sleep?" Caleb asked. "Not yet. Too much thinking." Ezra sat down beside him, pulling his coat tight against the cold. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why'd you do it? Really? You had your own life, your own daughter, your own grief. Why'd you take on 4 strangers with more problems than anyone should have to deal with?" Caleb considered the question. He'd asked himself the same thing in the dark hours of the night, when the weight of responsibility felt crushing. "You remember what your papa said about the measure of a man? That it's not what he has, but what he's willing to fight for?" "That's right." Caleb looked at the boy beside him, this child who'd become a man too soon, who'd carried his family through hell, who'd never stopped fighting, even when fighting seemed hopeless. "I spent 3 years hiding from the world, Ezra, telling myself I was protecting myself and Nell. But I wasn't protecting anything. I was just dying slow." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Then your sister asked me a question in that market. A simple question from a simple heart. And suddenly I saw myself through her eyes, through your eyes. I saw a man who had the power to help and was choosing not to. I didn't like what I saw." "So you changed?" "I tried. I'm still trying." Caleb put his hand on Ezra's shoulder. "But here's the thing I've learned. Changing, growing, becoming better. You can't do it alone. You need people. You need family. You need someone to fight for and someone who will fight for you." "And that's us? That's what we are to you?" "That's exactly what you are." Caleb squeezed the boy's shoulder. "You asked me why I took on 4 strangers with too many problems. Here's the truth. You weren't strangers, not really. You were lost, and I was lost, and somehow we found each other. That's not charity, Ezra. That's fate."
Ezra was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick.
I was so angry, after Mama and Papa died. Angry at the world, at God, at everyone who walked past us without seeing. I promised myself I'd never trust anyone again, never let anyone close enough to hurt us.
And now?
Now I think maybe I was wrong.
Ezra looked up at the stars, blinking back tears.
Maybe the world isn't all bad. Maybe there are people worth trusting.
Maybe it's okay to stop fighting long enough to let someone help. That's called growing up, son.
Is it supposed to hurt this much?
Sometimes. The good kind of hurt, though. The kind that means you're healing. They sat together in comfortable silence, father and son, watching the night deepen around them. Inside the cabin, the noise had settled into quiet. Everyone finding their place. Everyone safe.
Papa?
Ezra's voice was small, younger than his years. Yeah, son?
Thank you. For everything. For seeing us. For fighting for us. For not giving up, even when it would have been easier.
You don't have to thank me, Ezra. That's not how family works.
I know, but I wanted to say it anyway. Just once.
Ezra stood up, stretching. I should get to bed. Big day tomorrow.
What's tomorrow?
First day of the rest of our lives, I reckon. The boy grinned, looking suddenly like the child he should have been all along.
Figure we better get started right.
He went inside, leaving Caleb alone with the stars and his thoughts. The rest of our lives. Caleb turned the phrase over in his mind, testing its weight. For 3 years, he'd thought his life was over, had convinced himself that survival was the best he could hope for. He'd been wrong. So wonderfully, terrifyingly wrong. Tomorrow would bring challenges. The next week, the next month, the next year. There would be setbacks and struggles and days when everything felt impossible. Raising 5 children on a mountain ranch wasn't going to be easy. But it was going to be good. He could feel it in his bones. This strange, broken, beautiful family he'd stumbled into. They were going to make it. Together. Caleb stood up, took one last look at the star-filled sky, and went inside to join his children. Spring came slow to the mountains that year, the snow retreating inch by stubborn inch, revealing brown earth and the first brave shoots of green. The children watched the transformation with wonder, especially Benny, who'd never seen anything but winter since they'd arrived.
Papa, look!
He came running into the cabin one morning, his hands cupped carefully around something small and fragile.
I found flowers! Real flowers!
Caleb set down his coffee and examined Benny's treasure. 3 tiny purple crocuses, their petals still damp with snowmelt. Those are the first ones of the season, he said. Your mama used to call them hope flowers. Said they proved that no matter how long the winter lasted, spring always came eventually.
Can we plant them so they grow more?
They're already planted, little one, right where you found them. But we can go back and visit them every day if you want. Benny's face lit up.
Every day!
He ran off to tell the others, and Caleb watched him go with a smile that still felt unfamiliar on his face. 6 months since he'd found 4 starving children in an alley. 6 months since his quiet, lonely life had been turned upside down, and somehow, against all odds, they'd made it through the winter. The children had changed in those months. Grown. Healed. Not completely, maybe not ever completely, but enough. Enough to laugh without looking over their shoulders. Enough to sleep through the night without screaming. Enough to believe that tomorrow would be better than yesterday. Ezra had shot up 3 inches and was starting to fill out, his frame no longer skeletal, but lean and strong. He'd taken to ranch work like he'd been born to it, rising before dawn to help with chores, asking questions about everything, absorbing knowledge like parched earth absorbing rain. "You're going to make a fine rancher someday," Caleb told him one afternoon, watching the boy repair a fence with quiet competence. Ezra looked up, something vulnerable flickering across his face.
"You think so?"
"I know so."
You've got good instincts and a strong back, and a mind that doesn't quit. That's all you need.
"Papa had a farm," Ezra said quietly. "Before. He was teaching me to run it. Said someday it would be mine."
And how does that feel, doing this kind of work again? Ezra was silent for a moment, his hands still on the fence rail.
"It feels like coming home. Like part of me that was sleeping finally woke up."
That's the land in your blood. Can't escape it, even if you wanted to.
"I don't want to." Ezra met Caleb's eyes. "I want to stay here forever. I want to help you build something that'll last."
"Then that's what we'll do. Together." Sadie had blossomed in different ways. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by something softer. She'd stopped rationing food, stopped counting heads every 5 minutes, stopped treating every day like it might be her last. She'd started singing again, old songs her mother had taught her, filling the cabin with music that made even the hardest days feel lighter. "You have a beautiful voice," Clara told her one afternoon when she'd come to visit.
"Has anyone ever told you that?"
Sadie blushed.
"Mama used to say I sang like an angel. I didn't believe her."
"You should have. She was right. I stopped singing after she died. Couldn't find the music anymore." Sadie's hands twisted in her lap.
"But lately, it's been coming back, little by little."
"That's how healing works, sweetheart. Little by little. Until one day you realize the weight you've been carrying isn't quite so heavy anymore."
"Does it ever go away completely? The weight?"
Clara considered the question. "No, not completely. But you get stronger, strong enough to carry it without it crushing you. And eventually, you find that some of the weight turns into something else, something lighter. Memories instead of grief, love instead of loss."
"Is that what happened to Mr. Caleb? With his wife?"
"That's exactly what happened, though it took him a while to figure it out." Clara smiled.
"He needed some help from a certain group of children who wouldn't take no for an answer."
Sadie laughed, the sound bright and free.
"We are pretty stubborn."
"That's not a flaw, honey. That's a strength." Tommy's progress was slower, more halting, but undeniable. He still didn't speak much, preferring to communicate through drawings that grew more elaborate and expressive by the day. But when he did speak, his words carried weight. He chose them carefully, deliberately, like each one cost him something precious.
"Papa."
He found Caleb in the barn one evening, his small figure silhouetted in the doorway.
"Can I show you something?"
"Always, son." Tommy led him to the loft, where he'd created a kind of studio in one corner. Drawings covered every surface, tacked to the walls, spread across the floor, piled on makeshift tables. Horses and mountains and families. Sunrises and storms and stars. But the drawing Tommy wanted to show him was different. It was larger than the others, more detailed, clearly the product of weeks of work. It showed 2 scenes side by side. On the left, a house in flames, figures running, smoke and terror and loss. On the right, a cabin in the mountains. The same figures, older now, standing together in front of it, smiling, safe.
"It's my story,"
Tommy said quietly.
"The before and the after."
Caleb studied the drawing, his throat tight. "It's beautiful, Tommy. The most beautiful thing I've ever seen."
"I wanted to remember both parts, the bad and the good, because you can't have one without the other."
"That's very wise."
Mama used to say that. She said life was like a quilt, made of dark patches and light patches. The dark ones make the light ones brighter.
Tommy touched the drawing gently. I think I understand now what she meant.
I think you do too.
Papa? Tommy looked up at him, his eyes clearer than they'd been in months.
Thank you for being our light patch, after all the dark.
Caleb pulled the boy into his arms and held on tight. Thank you for letting me.
Benny, the youngest, had perhaps changed the most visibly. The hollow-eyed waif from the alley was gone, replaced by a round-cheeked, energetic whirlwind who seemed to be everywhere at once. He'd appointed himself the official ranch greeter, welcoming every visitor with boundless enthusiasm.
Hello, I'm Benny Thornton. That's my new name because my papa adopted me. Do you want to meet my horse? Her name is Duchess Jr., because Nell named her after the big horse. I have 4 brothers and sisters now. Well, 3 brothers and 1 sister. But Sadie says she's like my sister too, so that's actually 2 sisters. Or wait, is it?
Caleb usually had to intervene before visitors drowned in the flood of information. But he never stopped Benny entirely.
The boy's joy was too pure, too precious, too hard-won to constrain.
He's going to talk everyone in the territory to death, Ezra observed one afternoon, watching Benny chase a bemused chicken around the yard while narrating the pursuit in excruciating detail. Probably, Caleb agreed. But there are worse fates.
You don't mind? That he's so... much?
I love that he's so much. I love that he's got enough happiness in him to share with everyone he meets. Considering where he was 6 months ago, it's a miracle. Ezra nodded slowly.
I was so scared for him, in those months on the street. He was so little, and he didn't understand why everything had changed. He kept asking when we were going home, when Mama and Papa were coming back.
What did you tell him?
I lied. Told him we were on an adventure, that Mama and Papa were waiting for us somewhere, and we just had to find them.
Ezra's voice roughened.
I hated myself for lying, but I couldn't tell him the truth.
Couldn't bear to see his face when he understood. You protected him, the only way you knew how.
Did I?
Ezra turned to look at Caleb.
Or did I just delay the inevitable? He had to find out eventually.
He found out in a place where there were people to catch him when he fell. He found out when he had a family around him, a home to come back to. You gave him that, Ezra. You kept him alive long enough to find his way here. Ezra was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly Caleb almost missed it, he said,
I'm glad. I'm glad we found you.
So am I, son. So am I. And then there was Nell, his firstborn, his heart, the one who'd started everything with a simple question in a frozen alley. She'd grown too, but differently than the others. Less visibly, perhaps, but no less profoundly. She'd gone from an only child to the middle of 5, from the sole focus of her father's attention to one of many competing priorities. It couldn't have been easy, but she'd risen to it. More than risen, she'd flourished.
Papa.
She found him on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose.
Can I sit with you?
Always, sweetheart. She settled onto the bench beside him, her small body tucked against his side. For a while, they just watched the light fade together, comfortable in their silence.
I miss Mama,
Nell said finally. I know. I do too.
But not as much as before. Is that bad?
Caleb put his arm around her. No, honey, that's not bad. That's healing.
It feels like forgetting. Like, if I'm happy, I'm betraying her somehow.
Listen to me, Nell. Caleb turned so he could look at her directly. Your mama wanted you to be happy, more than anything else in the world. If she could see you now, see this family we've built, she'd be so proud. Of you, of all of us.
You think so?
I know so. She used to talk about it, having a big family, filling this cabin with children.
She'd be tickled pink to see it finally happening. Nell smiled through her tears.
She'd love them. Ezra and Sadie and Tommy and Benny.
She'd love them like they were her own, just like you do.
I do love them. Nell wiped her eyes. I didn't think I would, at first. I thought it would be weird, having brothers and sisters after being alone so long. But it's not weird. It's wonderful.
What's wonderful about it?
Everything. Having someone to play with, having someone to share secrets with, having someone who understands what it's like to be scared, to be sad, to miss the people you've lost.
Nell leaned into Caleb's side.
I'm not alone anymore, Papa. For the first time since Mama died, I'm not alone.
Caleb kissed the top of her head. Neither am I, sweetheart. Neither am I. The trial of Victor Crane and Silas Murdoch came in late April, just as the mountain wildflowers were beginning to bloom. Judge Whitmore had insisted on presiding personally, and the territorial capital was buzzing with anticipation. Caleb took Ezra with him to testify. The boy had asked to go, had insisted, even knowing how hard it would be. He said he owed it to his parents, owed it to himself. The courtroom was packed when they arrived. Crane sat at the defendant's table, his face pale and drawn, a shadow of the confident man who'd threatened Caleb at the ranch. Murdoch sat beside him, his arm still in a sling from where Caleb had shot him months ago. Ezra's testimony was devastating. He spoke clearly and calmly, describing the night of the fire, the months on the street, the kidnapping, the terror. He didn't cry, he didn't waver. He looked Crane directly in the eye and told the truth. "You took everything from us," Ezra said, his voice ringing through the silent courtroom. "Our home, our parents, our childhood. You treated us like we were nothing, like our lives didn't matter." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was stronger. "But you were wrong. We matter. We survived. And now the whole world is going to know what you did." The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Crane was sentenced to hang. Murdoch got 30 years in territorial prison. After the verdict, Whitmore called Caleb aside. "You did good work here, Thornton. Those children have a chance now because of you." "They had a chance because they never gave up. All I did was open a door."
"False modesty doesn't suit you," Whitmore smiled. "Take the compliment. You've earned it."
They rode home through the spring sunshine. Ezra quiet beside Caleb, but not withdrawn. Processing, maybe. Coming to terms with the end of a chapter he'd thought would never close.
"It's really over,"
Ezra said finally, as the familiar shape of the cabin came into view.
"They're going to pay for what they did."
"Justice was served. Your mama and papa can rest now."
"I hope so."
Ezra looked at the cabin, at the smoke rising from the chimney, at the small figures running out to greet them.
"I hope they can see this, see what we've become." "I think they can, son. I think they've been watching the whole time." The others mobbed them as they dismounted, Benny wanting to know everything, talking so fast his words tripped over each other. Sadie asking if Ezra was okay, her eyes searching his face for signs of strain. Tommy pressing a new drawing into Caleb's hands, a picture of scales balanced perfectly. Justice served. And Nell, standing back slightly, watching with that knowing look she sometimes got. So like her mother, it made Caleb's heart ache.
"Welcome home,"
she said simply. Home. The word had meant something different 6 months ago. A place of silence and grief, of memories too painful to touch. Now it meant laughter and chaos and love. Now it meant family. Summer blazed across the mountains, bringing long days and hard work, and the particular contentment that came from building something together. The children threw themselves into ranch life with enthusiasm that sometimes outpaced their abilities. Ezra learned to break horses, to read the weather, to mend fences that would hold through the harshest winter. He grew another 2 inches and had to have all his clothes let out. Sadie took over the kitchen garden, coaxing vegetables from soil that had lain fallow since Margaret's death. She learned to can and preserve, to make bread that rivaled Clara's, to create meals that brought the whole family to the table with eager anticipation. Tommy discovered a talent for woodworking, his artistic eye translating into carved figures that grew more detailed with each attempt. He made gifts for everyone: a horse for Benny, a flower for Sadie, a star for Nell. For Caleb, he carved a family, 6 figures standing together, small enough to fit in a pocket. Caleb carried it everywhere. Benny appointed himself chief egg collector, chicken wrangler, and general supervisor of all things small and living. He named every animal on the ranch, held funerals for the ones that died, and celebrated the ones that were born, with homemade songs that made everyone laugh. And Nell held them all together, the heart of the family, the one who remembered birthdays and smoothed arguments and made sure no one felt left out. She was 8 years old and already showing the kind of wisdom that usually took decades to develop. "Papa," she asked one night as he was tucking her into bed, "do you ever regret it, taking them in?" "Never. Not for 1 second. Even when Benny broke the window? And when Tommy accidentally set fire to the haystack? And when Ezra and Sadie had that huge fight about nothing?" Caleb laughed. "Even then, those are just the messy parts of being a family. They don't change how I feel." "How do you feel?" He considered the question. "Lucky, grateful, scared sometimes because I love you all so much and the world is dangerous, but mostly just full. Like there was a hole inside me that I didn't know was there until you all filled it." Nell smiled. "That's how I feel too." "Yeah?" "Yeah. I thought when Mama died that I'd never feel whole again. But then we found them, and now—" She paused, searching for words. "Now it's different. Not better than before, because I still miss Mama. But not worse either. Just different. Fuller." "That's a good way to put it." "I think Mama would be happy," Nell said. "I think she'd look at our family and smile." "I think so too, sweetheart." He kissed her forehead and rose to leave, but her voice stopped him at the door. "Papa, I'm glad I asked that question, in the alley." "What question?" "Can we buy them?"
I know it sounded wrong, the way I said it. But I'm glad I asked anyway, because look what happened. Caleb looked at his daughter, this small person who'd changed everything with 7 words. "I'm glad too, Nell. More than I can say." The first anniversary came on a cold February morning, exactly 1 year since Caleb had found 4 starving children behind a general store. They marked it with a special breakfast, with stories about how far they'd come, with tears for what had been lost, and joy for what had been found. 1 year, Ezra said, looking around the table at his family. 1 year ago, I didn't think we'd survive the week. 1 year ago, I was so hungry I couldn't think straight, Sadie added. Now I'm the one making sure everyone else is fed. 1 year ago, I was scared all the time, Benny said. Now, I'm only scared sometimes, like when there's thunder, and spiders, and that one chicken who looks mean. Everyone laughed. Even Tommy smiled, a rare and precious thing. 1 year ago, he said quietly, and everyone went still. Tommy speaking voluntarily was still unusual enough to command attention. 1 year ago, I thought I'd never talk again, never feel anything again. I was wrong. Caleb raised his coffee cup. To the past year, to the years ahead, to this family,
built from broken pieces and held together by love. To love, they echoed. Outside, snow was falling, soft and silent, blanketing the world in white. Inside, the fire crackled, the food steamed, and 6 people sat together, grateful for everything they had and every one they'd become. Later that afternoon, Caleb stood on the porch watching his children play in the snow. Benny was trying to build a snowman, but kept getting distracted by snowflakes. Tommy was making snow angels, his serious face transformed by rare delight. Sadie and Nell were having a whispered conversation, punctuated by giggles.
Ezra stood apart, watching over them all, the protector he'd always been, but no longer needed to be. He caught Caleb's eye and walked over to join him on the porch. "You're thinking about something," Ezra said. "Just remembering. A year ago. How different everything was." "Better now?" "Infinitely." Ezra nodded, looking out at his siblings. "I used to pray, in those months on the street. I'd pray for someone to help us, anyone. I didn't really believe anyone would, but I prayed anyway." "And?" "And you showed up." Ezra turned to face Caleb. "I don't know if I believe in God anymore, but I believe in you. I believe in this family. I believe that sometimes, when everything seems hopeless, something good can still happen. That's called faith, son." "I guess it is." Ezra smiled, young and old at once, carrying his scars with grace. "Thank you, Papa, for answering my prayer." Caleb pulled the boy into an embrace, this child who'd become his son, who'd taught him as much as he'd taught them. "Thank you for being worth answering." They stood together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors that seemed impossible, too beautiful for a world that contained so much darkness. But that was the thing about beauty, Caleb had learned. It didn't exist despite the darkness. It existed because of it. Light only mattered when there was shadow to overcome. Nell's voice drifted up from the yard. "Papa, Ezra, come play with us." Ezra pulled back and grinned. "Race you to the snowman." "You'll lose." "Probably, but I'll have fun anyway." He took off running, and Caleb followed, slower but no less joyful. He reached the others and was immediately pelted with snowballs from all directions, his children ganging up on him with shrieks of laughter. He fell dramatically, clutching his heart. "I'm hit! I'm done for! Save yourselves!" Benny threw himself on top of Caleb, covering him protectively. "I'll save you, Papa." My hero. They lay in the snow together, all 6 of them, looking up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Cold and wet and completely, perfectly happy. "Papa," Benny asked, "is this what family is? Lying in snow and looking at stars?" "That's part of it." "What's the rest?" Caleb thought about the question, thought about Margaret, who taught him how to love, about the years of grief and solitude, about a little girl's question in an alley, about 4 broken children who'd somehow become whole again. "Family is showing up," he said finally, "every day, no matter how hard it gets. Family is choosing each other over and over, even when choosing is difficult. Family is knowing that you're not alone, that someone's got your back, that no matter what happens, you belong somewhere, to someone." "Like us?" "Exactly like us." Benny snuggled closer. "I like being family." "Me too, little one. Me too." The stars came out in full glory, brilliant against the dark sky. The cold settled deeper, and eventually they'd have to go inside, to warmth and light and all the small comforts of home. But not yet. For now they lay together, 6 souls bound by choice and love
and the simple miracle of finding each other in a vast and lonely world. In the market a year ago, a little girl had asked an innocent question. "Can we buy those children?" She hadn't understood then what she was really asking. Neither had Caleb, but he understood now. She'd been asking him to open his heart, to let go of his grief and his fear and his stubborn belief that he was better off alone. She'd been asking him to be a father again, not just to her, but to 4 strangers who needed him as much as he needed them. He'd said yes, the best decision of his life. Margaret would have been proud, not just of him, but of all of them.
Of this family they'd built from scraps and hope and sheer determination. Of these children who'd survived the unsurvivable and come out stronger on the other side. He carried her with him still, always would. But he wasn't living in her shadow anymore. He was living in her light, the light she'd left behind, the love that hadn't ended with her death, but had grown and changed and found new forms. 5 children, 1 father, a cabin in the mountains, a life that had seemed over, now beginning again in ways he'd never imagined. That was the truth he'd learned this year, the truth those broken children had taught him, that it was never too late, that hope could survive anything, that family wasn't about blood or obligation or duty. Family was about love, nothing more, nothing less. And Caleb Thornton, once a man with nothing left to lose, now had more love than he knew what to do with.
It was, he thought, as he gathered his children and headed inside to warmth and home, more than enough. It was everything.